Welcome back to Ace Chat. I am Marissa, and today I'm sitting down with Brandi to chat about basically anything and everything. We've just been talking about a lot of different things from Harry Potter to fandom in general to trying to figure out this quarantine. So, thank you for sitting down with me today, Brandi. Just to start off, I'd love to learn a little bit more about you. I'm hoping you can just share a few fun facts about yourself with our listeners.
I am your friendly neighborhood asexual Black woman. I am 30 years old. I live in Maryland. I'm a creative and a neurodiverse person, and I'm genuinely a huge nerd. I'm messy, but I'm organized. I think this is more than 3 sentences at this point.
No, no, semicolons, you're totally fine.
Oh, yeah, that's another thing. Big punctuation, grammar, spelling nerd. Stop using apostrophes when you pluralize things. I hate you. No, I'm kidding. It's all love. Oh, go get your vaccines and wear your masks and be responsible human beings.
Yes, be responsible. Completely agree. And just guys, let's end this. Please just wear your masks and get vaccinated. But on the subject of responsibility, great segue. Um, we were talking about how, as ACE creators, it's kind of our responsibility to promote ACE Rep, to increase ACE Rep, to make us think about the fact that there's not a lot of ACE Rep. So I'd love to hear some of your thoughts on fandom, ACE Rep, just kind of in general.
As I said before, I believe that our fandoms are the first place that we seek representation for ourselves and for our communities. We want to see somebody who looks like us, having a story told about them, because I think that as human beings, or maybe even essentially it is what makes us human, is that stories are the way that we understand ourselves and each other and the world around us. Stories are literally how we psychologically process and make sense of things. You can't even get through a single day without telling a story somehow. You could literally have 3 random objects in front of you and then do 3 tableaus of the 3 objects in different positions, and your brain will make up a story to explain it. So you seek to see yourself in these stories so that you can become self-actualized and really know yourself. And so when you don't see yourself represented, it makes you feel kind of erased or out of place. So, especially, a lot of characters are headcanoned, I guess, by a lot of fans as being ace or whatever, because they're not usually explicitly canonized or made to be ace by whoever created them or whoever is acting them. And sometimes, it's actually really easy to do a reading of a character like that. Like I personally am a huge fan of the BBC Sherlock, and I completely 1000% headcanon Benedict Cumberbatch's Sherlock as Ace. So, which might to some people be really obvious because but I feel like, yeah, he's also I don't think he's necessarily aromantic, because I think he definitely has all of his relationships in a way are a kind of romance, like the weird back and forth he has with his brother, and then obviously the more perhaps conventionally romantic kind of cat and mouse game with Irene Adler, and then his relationship with John and how that's been deepening, and then the way he kind of immediately fell in love with Mary and adopted her into his own little circle, and just the little way he just loves Molly and accepts and respects that she's completely actually in love with him. And you get what I'm saying. But I think it's also a really interesting way to see different characters sort of illustrate different kinds of love for you. What is it? There are how many different words? 8 different words in the Greek language for love,
Yeah.
So it's kind of like you sort of look to be included, like you just want to be a part of the story, and that way you actually sort of find a community you're a part of. Because that's what our fandoms are. They're communities in themselves. And then I think we have our own little subsets of, some people are getting into Star Wars. Some people are Finn Poe shippers, and some people are Reylo shippers, and some people are whatever. So yeah, I think but I also kind of have I won't say a love-hate relationship with it, because I have hella ships, but I also don't think two characters who have a chemistry and a good relationship always necessarily need to be a ship. Like, people are like, I ship it, and it's like, that's cool, but like, can't they also just be really great friends? Like, that in itself has value and worth to me. Like, that's interesting. It doesn't have to be a romantic relationship to me in order to sort of have come to its final form, or its conclusion, you know. Like, that doesn't necessarily have to be where everything goes.
No, you're so right. It doesn't need to be, but it's where it does tend to go. And then people in the community are faced with this dual hardship where it's like, we're not getting the rep we need, not getting the rep we want. And we're also getting told that these other things that maybe are important to us, like friendship, aren't that meaningful. Things that can be and often are important to people outside of our communities as well. So it's this weird it's this weird thing of, you can't have your rep and also these other things that matter. We're going to invalidate that as well.
And I think, maybe I'm projecting, but I think all of us kind of have, at least one story of, having a friend who got really into the person they were dating, and they just stopped like spending time with you, and you like never saw them anymore. Or like, your friend got married and then they changed and your friendship didn't really survive. Like, I know
Yeah.
I've had relationships like that myself. I used to have this one friend who, she started dating this guy, and I knew it wasn't gonna last. I'll be honest. First of all, I am that friend. I'm that honest friend. If I don't think it's gonna last, I'll tell you. Like, don't ask me if your baby is cute, because if it's not, I won't lie. I am that friend. But she started dating this guy, and she was, all gaga over him. And every time she made plans with me, she would break them so she could go hang out with him. And I was like,
Yeah.
This is 3 times now. Like, this is not cool. You're making me feel very like unappreciated, and I don't think this is like, this is not something I would do to you. So it bothers me that you think this is okay. And I ended up, basically telling her, hey, like, I'm not good with this. I don't think I want to hang out anymore. So
Well, and good for you for doing that, because yeah, this is making me think of what we were saying about media, because I think this is partially media's influence, media making us think these other relationships aren't as important as a romantic sexual one. That's the be all end all, which is dumb, because there's definitely things you want to do with friends, family, that you wouldn't want to do with a romantic sexual partner. And that makes me think of QPRs. I love QPRs for a lot of reasons. They just seem so concerned with communication, with this idea of every relationship is unique and special and is allowed to blossom however it does. So I think we'd really learn a lot from them if we learn to communicate that same way in other relationships. And I don't know why we don't. I don't know why we withhold so much.
social convention, fear of vulnerability,
Mm.
fear of inadequacy, and generally, I'm not sure how to put this one, but like the kind of unspoken expectations, like you kind of like, there's this desire that we all have, I think, to be understood. And we feel like if we have to explain ourselves in order to be understood, we're not really understood. Like, you know what I mean? Like, I think people want this very unrealistic psychic connection between their partner. That's just not fair to them. Like, you can't expect people to read your mind and always know what you're feeling, you know?
Well, it's funny because I kind of meant it rhetorically, not expecting an answer, but those are the answers. Like, yeah, definitely that's why. And the funny thing is, this psychic connection could be made more easily if people did communicate, which it brings me back to what you were saying about fandom as a community. And something unique about fandom is there's no holding back, right? Everyone is 100% honest, which whether it be about what characters should get together or just
People have a lot of feelings and a lot of opinions. There's a lot going on in the comment section of Tumblr and YouTube, you know what I mean? There's a lot of stuff happening. Anybody who's ever been to a fan convention knows it's like, it's like their mecca. Like, you just have all these people, and you kind of have a shorthand with other fans too, because you can make references to the show that they'll understand, or you can quote things back and forth to each other, or even sometimes certain objects have significance. Like, I'm sure if you go up to a Doctor Who fan and you like show them a screwdriver or whatever, they're like, So it's just kind of one of those things where it connects people.
So it's funny you mentioned Doctor Who because there is all this discourse about how the Doctor, especially the 11th Doctor, may be asexual just due to how he behaves around other people in these sexual, and also maybe aromantic in these romantic situations. And also, and this I want to hear from you about because you and I have talked about how this doesn't apply to us, how he seems to be oblivious of those sexual romantic situations and jokes and etc.
We're not oblivious to to sexual innuendo or even sexual tension, and it's like we are. It's not like we don't have a sense of humor, like we totally do. So I don't know, it's people kind of have this idea, this misconception that just because we're asexuals that we are naive or that we are inherently sex repulsed, and that's just not true.
Right. And like, I mean, it can be for certain individuals. With me, sometimes I am. But it's like we're constantly having to say the stereotypes are sometimes true, but not for everyone.
There's more than one way to be asexual. So like the stereotype is true for some people, but it's not everybody. Or this stereotype might be true for some people, but it's not everybody. Not all of it. Like a lot of us, encounter people who think like, oh, because we're ace, we don't want a relationship, or we don't fall in love or have a lot of feelings. Like I have so many feelings, and I'm a super romantic person. Like it's like I know I could be a little intense, I'm gonna be honest, but but it's just like I don't know what, like those things are not necessarily inherently linked, and sexuality is a spectrum, and you can have sort of different feelings about it on different days, and same with romance. Like some days you just you could be really into like a kind of traditional kind of thing, or you just want to be like, hey, let's just like figure this out, in a more casual way. It's like you're allowed to change and fluctuate as a person in, I mean, whatever capacity of your life, as long as you're communicating with your other person and being responsible. But like, yeah, it's you don't I think people get this idea that they have to be one thing always, right, especially when it comes to labels. It's like, well, if I say I'm this now and I change my mind later, does that mean I'm fake? Does that mean I was lying? Does that mean I was delusional? Does that mean people are going to think? It's like, stop worrying what other people are going to think. Give yourself permission to change and figure stuff out as you go, because that's what we all do. That's what life is.
On that note, I'd love to hear a little bit more about your ACE journey because I know you personally have changed your labels, have come to these different and more true understandings of yourself. So can you just tell us a little about how you used to identify, how you identify now, and what led you to changing those labels, realizing that change?
I mean, I think just for my own personality, even before I ever heard of asexuality, I became very comfortable with the idea that people are complicated and we don't always make sense. Sometimes we don't understand ourselves, and human beings are full of contradictions. Like stuff sometimes isn't going to make sense. That's okay. You could have two qualities coexist. Some days you're, in some ways and situations, I can be a really shy person, and sometimes I'm very comfortable like this. Like I'm, my background has made me really good with public speaking, and I can, introduce myself to strangers pretty easily, in a lot of situations and stuff. But like, and then you have to sort of look at, I guess, your qualities. People are always thinking about their flaws, but are you really like looking at your virtues too, like the good qualities, like the fact that you're a caring person, or you're a trustworthy person, or you're a hardworking person, or whatever? Those things, your flaws are just as valid as your virtues. Like you don't necessarily have to, identify more with one than the other. They're all part of you. They're both of you. Right. So yeah, they're both part of you. So it's kind of this thing where I guess as I was sort of developing my understanding of myself that way, I mean, because I knew from a very young age that I was a very romantic person. I was like, I loved lovey-dovey stuff. I had, I think I had my first crush on a boy when I was like 5 years old. So for a long time I was confused because I was like, I feel all this affection. I feel romantically attracted to people, but I don't necessarily feel like I want to do sexual things. And for a long time, I was trying to figure out I guess I assumed that one, it was because I was young, and then I hit puberty, and then I was kind of sort of like having, the sort of typical hormone reactions, I guess. But I also noticed people around me were a lot more interested in trying to date somebody than I was. And I was like, oh, is something wrong with me? Or do I just, but also it was complicated by the fact that I grew up in a religious environment. Like, my parents sent my brother and me to Catholic school until we went to high school, and then they raised us, in a Baptist church and stuff. So I had all of this sort of purity culture around me, and so I was like, okay, well, it's okay if I don't really want anything to do with sex. I'm not supposed to, right? But then at the same time, it's like, well, there's this sort of contradiction. It's like, well, if it's this common impulse and it's this very natural human behavior and all this stuff, like, why do I have to necessarily feel shame around it? Like, I'm supposed to like it, but in this certain situation. And so I had a lot of unpacking to do with that, because of course I was getting older. I graduated high school, and then all of a sudden I was in college in a new city on my own. It's like co-ed dorms and everything, and your neighbors, you can hear them next door, you know what I mean? Like,
yeah.
So you start thinking about, that very loaded V word, and it was like, okay, should I have lost it by now? Should I tell people about, because people, I noticed in our culture a lot, especially, with, the comedy genre, virgin jokes are very prevalent, and people are always making fun of people. I mean, they did a whole movie about the 40-year-old virgin.
40-year-old virgin.
Mm-hmm. And I was like, and they made it out like he was this kind of, and it's a very funny movie, I'll say that, I will give them that, but they kind of made it out like his character was emotionally stunted in a way, and it was somehow holding him back in life. And I guess I couldn't help but sort of internalize attitudes like that for a while. So I guess I was trying to find a situation. I was like, okay, if I find the right person, because I knew a casual sexual relationship was not for me. I wasn't interested. I wasn't feeling that, but I knew lots of people were. So I was like, okay, that's cool with them. These are for me personally, whatever consenting adults want to do, I'm cool with that. That's none of my business. But I was like, how do I figure this out? What does this mean for me? If I know that I want this, but I don't want this, not necessarily, I might want this in a certain situation, but it's not a given, and people seem to think it is, and they naturally always have to go together, but that's not the way I feel things. And I didn't have language for that for a long time. And so then I honestly, I don't even remember how the word asexual was revealed to me. I don't remember the first place I encountered it or heard it, but it sort of was something that stayed in the back of my mind. And then I think it was through a Tumblr post, I think, that I came across the word demisexuality. And I was like, oh, okay. So there are people who have a word for not really feeling interested in sex until they have an emotional bond with someone, and that can develop if that sort of love and relationship between them develops. It's I understand that. That's kind of what I've been feeling, right? Because I was really in love with someone, I would think about, oh, maybe I might want to have sex with them, or if they, or I would at least see how they felt about it. But if I didn't have those feelings, it was why would I ever do that?
Yeah.
And it's also weird too, because I had this, I guess in a way, there was also a kind of fear of sex growing up. I was very cognizant of the fact that I could be used. Somebody might pretend they had feelings for me if they just wanted to have sex. I saw that happen to more than one friend. And I didn't want to go through that. I was like, I don't want to be used. I don't want to be tricked. But then I also knew that it was, I guess I was also kind of traumatized by learning that sex could be used as a form of violence, becoming aware of rape and sexual assault as, a preteen, I guess, people can use that to hurt you. So that was always something that was kind of in the back of my mind too. So I was like, for me, I was thinking there were so many ways that this thing that people tell me I'm supposed to want could actually make me not feel good about myself. It's kind of hard to explain, but once I started, once I was like post grad, and I was actively dating and trying to, just a girl just out there trying to find some love. And I was like, this is a really tricky sort of ocean to navigate, because a lot of these fish want sex, and some of them lead with that, and it's like, that's not the right way to come at me. Like, you're not necessarily doing anything wrong, but like, I'm not buying what you're selling here. I'm not, so it's kind of hard to find that fit sometimes. But then even once we get to a point where I'd been, with one person for a while, and I'd come to a point where I was like, okay, like, I'm thinking about it now. Like, maybe I should bring it up. And it was always right about that time that the relationship ended. And I was like, not yet. Okay. But, as I got older, as I started reaching about, I guess, my late 20s, I was like, I don't think I need to keep seeing this as something that is something I need to correct, like, it's, if I'm happy and I've had a good relationship with my body, and I have avoided making the mistakes that I was afraid of making, well, then there's nothing to be ashamed of. I'm fine. There's nothing wrong with me. And like, I don't know why I don't need to take it to heart or internalize it or even give it a second thought if people want to judge me or make jokes or whatever, because they don't know me. They don't love me. They don't have my body. They don't live my life. They don't pay my bills. They don't have a say. So yeah, and especially since I'm always somebody who's telling my friends, stop caring what other people think. I was like, all right, so I need to practice what I preach here. Like, this is not, this is just who I am, and that's okay. And it's okay if it's complicated. It's okay if some days I'm sex favorable and some days I'm sex repulsed and some days I'm sex indifferent. And it's okay if, I can look at somebody and go, damn, you fine, and still not want to have sex with them. And it's okay if, like, in a kind of detached way, I could sort of like get turned on by like other people. It's like, oh, that's really hot. Like, they're like, I like how they feel about each other, but like, I don't want to be involved. I'm good. Like, it doesn't always have to be this very black and white, cut and dry kind of thing. It can be kind of ambiguous and amorphous, and it's, I don't know, once I embraced it, I was a lot happier. And once I realized there's actually a lot of us, I didn't feel like there was something wrong with me anymore. I was like, oh, this is just something, this has always been there, but it's just, we didn't know because people weren't talking about it for a long time. And now we're talking about it. And I want us to keep talking about it.
So agree, hence why we're doing Ace Chat and doing this. I want to go back a second, though, because you were talking about maybe seeing other people and thinking that's hot, and also the fact that some aces do fantasize, especially agosexuals, and you've mentioned that you do ID in part with agosexuality.
I totally do. I totally have fantasies.
I know with some agos, it's more of like fictional characters. Some people, it's real people. Some people, it's like this third person sort of fantasizing. So what is it like for you? What does agosexuality look like for you, Brandi, specifically?
I know, for me, I know I definitely feel weirder thinking about real people in a sexual way than I think about fictional, because then it's real people. And I'm like, oh gosh, how would they feel if they knew I thought that? They might be really uncomfortable. Or also, like, what if like the next time I see them, I can only just picture them naked? Like, it's very weird. It's like, sometimes I can do it, but most of the time I'm like, that's just weird. I don't know. I don't really, I feel fictional, and it's also complicated too. Like, if I'm thinking of a fictional character who, obviously is played by a real person, like, sometimes I could be like, oh man, that actor is like, but I don't actually know that person as an actor. I mean, I might, still develop a kind of emotional reaction to them, I guess, by seeing them all the time and by watching them like do interviews and stuff, but like, it's not actually that person that I'm attracted to, like, so that also can be confusing people. They're like, well, how can you have a crush on this actor and still be ace? It's like, well, because he's hot, but like, I'm not trying to like, it's different. Like, I'm not actually trying to like get with him, but I like thinking about him sometimes.
Well, and yeah, it goes back to it all being a spectrum, right? Because if you try to confine asexuality to it's just this or this, and also if you try to confine allosexuality to it's just this or this, there are going to be no aces and there are going to be no allos. We're all just going to be walking around like, who are we? What are we? What's going on? Because it isn't the same for one ace person as it is for another. Going back to the aloe comment, I had a friend who mentioned, and he does ID as aloe, and he said that he had not experienced sexual attraction for an entire year. So, I mean, if he had used the ace label for that year, that would have been fine. And he didn't, but it was totally up to him because that was his experience then.
That's happened to me. I've had a a whole stretch for a year or two where I just didn't I wasn't attracted to anybody. Like I just
Yeah.
not even a crush. I was just doing my little thing, just going along, being your friendly neighborhood ace. And then one day I was like, oh crap, am I catching feelings?
Well, and then there's also like the things that people think aces can't do or that aces can't like, that some aces do and some aces do like.
I know you and I are both big fans of fan fiction,
Yes.
and I think and I think a lot of people are surprised to know that a lot of aces actually enjoy like the smutty kind of fan fiction. Like
Yeah.
I certainly do. That's most of the fan fiction I read is because I mean that tends to like turn me on more than people do. It's like, ooh, this is getting interesting. So,
No, absolutely. And I mean, like when I'm what I'll always go to the angst or the hurt comfort, but
yes. Why does the pain feel so good?
right. So like I'll read like I'll go to the labels angst, hurt, comfort, maybe adventure, something like that, but if it's got these other elements like smut in it, and if it makes the story, if it makes me better understand the characters, if it pushes the plot forward, like I am fine reading it, or at least since I get, I'm slightly sex repulsed, maybe skimming it, and still enjoying what it adds to the story. So well, not all of it. Sometimes it's bad.
Sometimes they're laughable. I'm not saying all smut is good. Like,
But to
good
be fair,
writing
sometimes
is good
those are
writing.
especially good.
Good
Like when you can
writing
just
is
sit
good
back.
Yeah, that's great. But yeah, no, aces like smut. Not all of us. Aces watch porn. Not all of us. It's a thing. So
Yeah.
yeah. Shout out to all my egos who just like to watch.
I think this conversation has helped me decide on my final question for you, and it is a mean one. You are only okay, Brandi. You're only allowed to give one answer only. Out of all of them in the world, all of the ones you can think of, what is your main favorite one true OTP?
Oh, you want me to choose my OTP of all OTPs?
All right. I won't be a monster. You can choose two.
Oh, it's so hard. Okay. Oh, well, one of my, I have to immediately give them a shout. I actually have the movie poster on my wall over there. People might remember last July, Netflix came out with a film adaptation of The Old Guard, which is a graphic novel series by Greg Rucka. And they have this amazing pairing who is completely canon, like always been in there from its inception, of Joe and Nikki, who are these two they're these two soldiers who met during the Crusades, like the year 1099. One was on the Muslim side, that people call the Saracens, and one was on the Christian side from Italy. And so they met on the battlefield as enemies, and they actually killed each other. But then, with the premise of the story, they were sort of regenerated and woke up again after they died. And they ended up, over the course of their new life, like becoming very close, and then they fell in love, and now they're like immortal husbands, and they're so cute. It's the sweet, like it's always like they're inseparable. Like the one without the other is like not a thing, and they're so cute. And I just like, and there's an amazing scene in the movie that's straight out of the comics where Joe makes this amazingly romantic declaration of love. It's like the most romantic thing you've ever heard in your life. Oh, I love them. I love them so much. They're just like they're cute and they're sexy and they're badass and they're completely unapologetically queer. Like they don't ever explain or apologize for being two men in love. They're just two men in love, and it's like so beautiful. So like they have to be at the top of the list. I love Joe and Nikki. And then my other OTP. I can do this. I got this. You know who I'm gonna say? And I'm gonna try not to get really pissed off. I still think Roman Rogers was a good ass ship. Go back and watch Captain America: The Winter Soldier and tell me that Steve Rogers and Natasha Romanoff were not fire as a pairing in that movie. I think they got so robbed. He ended up going one way, she ended up going another way. I still think that made a lot more sense to me than her and Bruce. I'm just saying.
I agree with you a lot on that second one. I actually haven't seen the first movie, so I'm gonna have to do that.
It's one of the best in the whole. Oh my god, are you serious? Like top 3 easily. Like it's so good.
I promise. I can't give like a time frame, but I promise I will. But that was actually my last question. So is there anything that you wanted to just end on? Any final notes you had for anyone listening?
Stop gatekeeping. Let people in. Yes. Let people feel accepted. That's what we're for. We all have felt like something was wrong with us or that we were alone. And don't deny somebody else that experience of finding that community. Just be a big warm group hug. Shout out especially to my Black aces. We stay breaking stereotypes. We are valid. I love you. Peace out.
And I love all of that. I love that we were able to have this conversation. I super appreciate you coming on Ace Chat and chatting with me. If anyone else would like to join the chat, especially about Ace Rep, especially about some specific examples like Todd Chavez, like Peridot, like Drea, like anything you want to recommend to me, we've had some great recommendations in the comments. Please reach out either to acechathats@gmail.com or you can comment down below. Make sure to follow us on Instagram and Twitter and keep on tuning back in. As always, thanks for being part of the chat and can't wait to continue it next time.